Hi, hello, welcome to my review of this new David Fincher movie, The Killer. This is the newest movie that he did with Netflix. He made a lot of movies with Netflix actually. In the last few years, he made Mank, which was a movie that I didn't really like that much. I mean, I thought it was fine, but it's just not for me. But he also is an executive producer for the show Love, Death and Robots, which I really like. He also directed one of their episodes in the third season. And so now he made his third collaboration with Netflix, I guess. I have to say that I'm not the biggest David Fincher fan. Every time he comes up with something, I'm just not that excited, or at least not as excited as most people seem to be, because movies like Gone Girl or Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or 7 Up, for example, one of the most beloved movies ever. And I just think they're fine, I guess. He does have a lot of movies that I really, really like, but it's just not the majority. And so when this came out, I just thought, okay, we'll see. To sum this movie up, it's very simple. This movie is about Michael Fassbender. He plays the killer, and he is on a normal job where he's trying to kill someone, and the job goes wrong, and so now he has to deal with it. That's basically the whole movie. There's not really that much else to it. And that's why this movie is kind of unique, to be honest, because this movie has a very thin plot. There's not a lot that happens in it, but it's just the way that this movie progresses its plot and portrays its plot that makes it watchable. The plot itself is not very interesting, nothing new, and especially not anything that is groundbreaking or unpredictable. It's just very simple, but it's the way that this movie gets to the plot that makes it so good. I do have to say that this movie combines a lot of things of different movies that I really enjoy. First of all, the opening sequence is very much like the opening sequence in American Psycho, and also in general the movie is told a lot through voiceover of Michael Fassbender that he's not really specifically saying to anyone, but he's just talking about it. It's like his thoughts that just are told to us as a viewer. But this movie also reminds me a little of John Wick, because John Wick has this underground world of crime, and basically the main character is an assassin who lives in this world of crime. The first John Wick movie very much hints on this world but doesn't really show anything, and in the same way The Killer also does. He's a guy who has been in this job for a very long time, and he knows his shit, he knows everyone, he knows his people, so you don't really get an explanation for who is who, and I kind of like that. And it's also very much like specific episodes of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, specifically scenes that revolve around Mike Ehrmantraut. He's one of my favorite characters in that show, and he has this very laid-back way of doing his stuff. He's very patient, he doesn't really rush, he never seems like he's out of control, and you can always see kind of the progress that he makes, but you don't really know what his goal is. You see it and you are wondering what is happening, and at some point there's a resolution of what this meant and why he did this, and it's like, oh wow, okay. And that's basically a big part of this movie as well. But yeah, I do have to say it's pretty difficult to talk about this movie in general. It's a good movie, it's definitely one of the most riveting movies of the whole year, but I just don't really know how to talk about it, because also there's not a lot that I could say about the plot, like without giving away half of the movie. But it's also not really about the plot itself. It's more about how the plot is progressing and not in which way exactly the plot is progressing, because you can definitely see a lot of things coming. That sounds pretty pretentious, to be honest, and a pretentious way of saying like this, there's nothing happening in this movie, but it's true. Like, this movie is very, very exciting and very on edge and very tense, even though it's a very easy plot to understand and there's not a lot of surprises if you just think about the plot for 1 second. It starts out with, again, this opening sequence that feels like American Psycho. It's this morning routine of his job, basically, and it's a very tense sequence. It's a very long sequence as well. It feels like the first half hour of this movie, or maybe the first 20 minutes, is not really anything happening, because it's just a very long build-up that is very well done. And this build-up is so great because there are very smooth camera movements. It's very still. It's kind of soothing as well, because it looks very good, and you only have this very quiet and whispery voice of Michael Fassbender talking to you. It's kind of like a podcast with just some visuals of an assassin preparing to kill someone. The music as well is very interesting. It's very laid back. Not laid back. It's very stripped down. There's not a lot to the music, but it still makes you very tense, because this first sequence and also the rest of the movie is just that. It's very smooth, it's not very moving, not a lot of camera movement, it's very still and very quiet and very patient with very little music, but everything works so that the movie creates maximum tension. And when the first sequence of this movie finally stops, there is a very quick release all of a sudden, and then you could just get thrown into the movie, and it's amazing. It's really, really good. After this release, we get into a movie that's kind of like an investigation thriller. It's also kind of a revenge story, and this whole movie is, from this point on, told very patiently, and very slowly and with a lot of tension. And I'm just constantly on edge because it never really lets you go and you never really know what's happening, because again, it's kind of like all the Mike Ehrmantraut sequences in Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, that you just, that the guy just does stuff and you can just like look at him, and it's fascinating to watch because you get a view into his psyche and a view into his life and the way this serial killer, or not serial killer but more just contract killer, living amongst us. There's also a lot of violent sequences that are very shocking because again, this movie is very smooth, but all of a sudden when there's violence, it hits so hard, it's so sudden, it's so brutal, it's very shocking, even though there's not anything explicit to see here, it's not overly bloody or anything, but it's just very well done because the build up to all of these deaths is so well done. I think I'm repeating myself a lot in this video, but that's basically just the way this movie is. There's also something very unnerving and disturbing about the way this guy just does his routine in a very trivial and normal way. Like there's, for example, a scene where he just orders something from Amazon. Yeah, he just uses that to break into someone's house, and he does that like it's nothing. Like it's just so normal to him, and it's so creepy that this is just normal to him. Like anyone could buy anything from Amazon and just break into your house and kill you. Like that's such a very unnerving thing to be in this movie. And just in general, there are a lot of I saw a lot of brands that are shown in this movie, but it's kind of not really annoying me. In other movies, it would be really annoying to just see our main character sip on a coffee cup from Starbucks, but in this movie, it just feels so weird and disgusting because this is such a dangerous guy. And this guy could be standing right next to you in your daily life, drinking a Starbucks coffee, and you wouldn't notice it. And that's like, to me, it added something really to this movie. And that's already like everything I have to say about this movie for the most part. I don't really know how to talk about this movie in detail because again, I would just spoil a lot of the plot. The plot itself is not that extravagant. It's just one guy doing shit, going from one part of the world to the next part of the world, slowly discovering the tracks of the people who did something to him and the people who are responsible for things that happened. But it's such a tense and slow moving film that is just incredibly impressive. I do have to say that first of all, I did not really care about the character himself. I thought the way they portrayed his character was interesting. I thought the plot was interestingly made, and I was definitely tense for the whole time, but I do have to say that I never really cared for him either surviving or achieving his goals. Like this could have ended in any way and I wouldn't really care. And I also have to say that this movie ends very abruptly and not with anything interesting. This movie has a plot that moves into a certain direction that I like. I don't think the ending of the story itself is bad, but it's just the way the movie concludes that leaves me kind of wanting more because it's just so anticlimactic without any epilogue. But here's the thing, I think that was definitely intentional because this movie, first of all, it starts off abruptly, you just get thrown into a situation. It ends very abruptly, like the story concludes and then it's just like over. And it's also a very impersonal movie in general because none of the characters, or most of the characters, don't even have names, especially the main character who's just called the killer. I don't think you are supposed to really care for the character in this film, which it sounds weird, but I think that's what they try to do. This is just a portrayal of this very cold and very creepy, dangerous guy and his way of solving problems that come into his way. It starts out with without any introduction of him or anything around him, and it ends like that as well, without ever really giving him any personality. He's kind of like a machine. There's something very creepy to that and very intentional, and I don't think I dislike it. So this movie is weird. This movie is very weird, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's one of my favorite David Fincher movies this far. Rating this movie is weird. I would give this movie maybe a 9 out of 10. I really like this movie. I think it's great. Definitely watch this movie. If you like David Fincher movies, definitely do. It really feels like a David Fincher movie in comparison to what Mank did. If you like thrillers, if you like spy movies, definitely check this out as well. This movie is very good. It's very unique, and I think this will definitely land on my list of the best movies of 2023. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.